Quill's like, hey, what's up?
Saddle.
What's up, guys? We are here for the second episode of Prose Before Bros. I don't know if you've been talking to people about it, but
A little bit.
I've already been hearing ripples in the water.
I told your uncle about it.
Prose Before Bros.
Yeah.
Yeah, he told. Yeah, that's where I heard it from. I was like, oh, jeez.
Yeah.
I was like, how did he find out? He's like, yeah, I heard you guys are doing a podcast.
Oh yeah. He
Like,
wants to
yeah.
hear it, dude.
Does he really?
Yeah. He said send it to me when you guys get it done.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's good.
He's ready to have his mind blown.
Right. Oh, jeez. No. So, what? So today is
Monday,
the 22nd.
Yep.
And Father's Day was just
Yesterday. Yeah.
So we decided that in honor of Father's Day, we would spend some time talking about fathers, and we'll see, man. I don't know. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll start with fathers, and
Yeah.
we'll see where the conversation takes us, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we both have definitely very different father experiences.
Quill is like,
Quill, settle.
this is our producer, in-studio producer, but she doesn't speak English, and so
Yeah, settle.
it's kind of hard to understand her sometimes. But what were you saying?
Just that we have different, I think, totally different experiences with our fathers, and so definitely have probably some different perspectives,
Yeah,
and now this was my first Father's Day where I was a father.
that's right,
So
Aaron.
that was pretty cool.
Big dog.
New experience. So
How was it?
it was good.
You enjoy it?
Oh yeah.
Did it feel any different than the other ones?
Well, yeah, because I got a card and a present and got coffee in bed. And
Hey,
so,
there you go.
yeah.
That's not too bad. Can't go wrong with coffee in bed.
Cool. So that'll.
That's cool.
Yeah. What about you?
I did nothing. Oh, no, that's not true. I took my pops out for Father's Day. We went to Little Smokes. And took the family out. And so that was good. That was fun. We had a good time. And, yeah. Nothing crazy. But it was cool. I had a good time.
Yeah. Did your dad have a good time?
He seemed like it, yeah. Yeah, he made the comment. He was like, oh, first time that one of my kids is actually taking me out for Father's Day and paid for it. It's like, whatever, Dad. So, like, I got the next one.
Oh yeah, dude, he's gonna be a millionaire, man. Real estate.
Oh, jeez, that kid. But, no, he's a good kid. But, yeah. I don't know. What did you have any thoughts specifically in terms of, like, your heads? Like, I know for me personally, like, I was raised really different than my dad. I had a totally different upbringing. And so, I don't know. What was it like? Do you have any thoughts specifically about your pops or
I mean,
about
yeah.
the whole day in general or what?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, my relationship with my dad was definitely not ideal. It was, I don't know. It was kind of an enigma. There was some really incredible things about my dad that, like, I think I appreciate more now that I'm older. Just now that I'm out in life and trying to navigate the world and, you know, have a family and support them and just so many things I appreciate about him and like who he was. But at the same time, it's like almost one of those things, like some of the things that made him so great, I think also were like his downfall.
Yeah.
Where he was like he was bad to the bone, like
Yeah.
in life. Did a lot of crazy stuff, and it was just like a man, like embodied what we think of, when we think of, masculinity, and just a rugged dude. But I think, dude, this is not gonna work.
Sorry, guys. The compressor's turning on again. Aaron's got to go and take the dog out. We'll just clip this part out.
Okay. I was gonna say, maybe we don't do podcasts in my house.
No, you're fine. It's good. It's no problem.
And
we're back. Go ahead. What you were talking about your dad being bad to the bone.
So him and my mom got married later in life. They were both older.
How old were they?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Really?
No, my dad was, I think they were both like later 30s.
And was this their first marriage for both of them?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so, yeah, I mean, just my dad, like, he'd done a lot of stuff in life and kind of was who he was at that point,
Sure.
And so this is actually a picture of my dad.
Look at this handsome fella. Let's see if we can zoom in.
So he was a commercial fisherman for 18 years off the coast of Nantucket. So he lived on Nantucket Island in Massachusetts and was a commercial fisherman there for 18 years. And just like super duper rugged life, that existence of commercial fishing. I mean, if anyone's watched like any of those shows on like National Geographic or
like Deadliest Catch or stuff like that
and stuff, yeah. Like, I mean, he wasn't in that ocean. He was in the Atlantic Ocean.
Sure.
But just, had so many stories of super gnarly stuff. Just as like, it doesn't matter what ocean you're in. Like, if you're in the ocean,
it's going to be brutal.
Yeah. And so just that, like, and that's who he was. And just, like before that, he was like a total hippie and traveled all over. He was a citizen of Canada. Like, we found when he died, we going through all this stuff and found like he had papers, citizenship for Canada. Like, he just had done so many things in life. And just, so then like we come along and we're just like, like we're just a part of that.
Yeah.
Like, that's, I think, sort of how, not that he viewed it that way, but that's just like what's the reality, And so, yeah, I mean, him and I didn't really have much relationship at all. It was sort of impossible to just be like close with him, He was, I wasn't super nice all the time. And so it's like, I know he loved us and cared about us and took care of us. But, I grew up with like having a dad around, in the home, but like very little interaction, especially when when I was young, it was, we were close, but as I got older, like the times when you like need your dad,
Sure.
to have like a real relationship and bond, it wasn't really there. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely different than how I was raised. My pops never like had a dad. He grew up in Texas, and like right on the border of Texas, and his dad died when he was like 5 or 6, I believe. So he was raised, with his mom, by his mom and his grandma, and at the time she wasn't saved. She was kind of, she hadn't given her life to Christ. She was just doing her thing and living her life. And so I think a lot of the times he wound up kind of raising himself, him and his brother, his older brother. They wound up like just having to fend for themselves. And, and their grandma watched out for them, and their uncle. They had an uncle that would take care of them as well. But, and so he moved up to Oregon at 16, and he gave his life to Christ. But then, and so he didn't have like a dad. And so like he was able to model fatherhood off of, the men that were in the church, the guys that were there, that were doing stuff and active and involved. He saw them and was like, okay, I'll take that from him and that from him and that from him. And, that's how he learned to be a father. And I'm, forever grateful for those men, and for what they were able to impart into him, but that still doesn't even with the giving of the father figures, it doesn't replace a biological father.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely things that he that he missed, and he's but he's an awesome guy. I wouldn't trade him for anything. And it just it's interesting. Fatherhood in general is really interesting. It feels like you see it, and it's like an expression of God's love for us, in a sense. It's one of the ways that God is like us, because as a dad, they do all of these things and they show you all of these things, but then you still can go and do whatever you want, or not do what they want. And and they're still there to help you when you do all your stupid stuff. Sometimes it's okay, it's crazy. I was thinking about that today. But yeah, no, that's my dad. That's his story.
That's cool. Was your dad with you and your brothers, or was he super hands-on, always showing you stuff and teaching you?
Oh yeah.
All the things that he could do.
Yeah, and I think yeah, he did and always has been like that. And I think I get some of that from him. I certainly resented it at one point, when I was younger.
Yeah.
Because it was no, I want to do things my way, and I had to, it's no, you have to do it, this is the right way to do it. And it's no, but let me figure that out.
Yeah.
I think that's something that every guy at least struggles with.
Yeah.
Is that the measuring up against the father like that. But eventually I just kind of realized no, that's just who he is, man. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's him, and you can't change him. But he's a lot better than he ever has been. But it's I know growing up it was there was things that was it was frustrating at times, but he had my best interest at heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because that's that the reality of that, what you were saying where you resented it, that's just in nature.
Right.
They've studied gorillas and just primates, and that they watched that happen. They've studied humans, and males especially, it's they learn by doing it themselves, figuring it out.
Yeah.
so you can show people things. And I think that's something that it's like one of those things. If dads could understand that, it would help them. Where they could understand like the biology that's at work. That like no matter what, it's in your boys to make their own path, right? Just like in general, in the big picture, but also in these little instructive things. Like what's best, the way they're going to learn it the best is if you show them the task and let them stumble their way through it until they get to it. Like they're going to learn how to do it better that way. So
Sure.
That's an interesting thing with dads, because obviously it's like it's like I know all the stuff, right? I know all the tricks. I got it. Like I can do all this stuff.
Right.
And here's like step 1, 2, 3, and you're done. But it's like
that's not like
the kid
how
has
it works.
They've got to do step 1 through 100, and then eventually they'll narrow it down to those steps.
Do you think about that like with Prose before Prose? Like going forward? Prose before Prose. Well, do you think about that with your kid going forward?
Totally. Well, even now, like, so he's not crawling, and so he's almost 11 months. And it's like, gotta crawl, you know. But it's like, so you get down and you're trying to like, but and obviously he's super young, so. But it's funny. It's just unavoidable. It's in you. You wanna, you want to help him do the thing,
Yeah.
But he's got to figure it out,
Yeah.
Like, he's going to crawl when he's ready to crawl. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know where to go from here.
I was just going to say, I mean, it's interesting, like what you're saying about how your dad's referencing all the fathers around him, because that's sort of been the thing I've had to do. Because I did have a dad around, but for the most part, I learned a lot of what not to do.
Sure.
And so I had all these, getting, married and then now having a son. I think fatherhood's easier than being a husband.
Because at least like you can kind of understand them, or what?
I mean, it's just there's a. It's a good question. I should have thought about that before I said it. It just seems like with parenthood, there's a lot of things that are instinctual.
Sure. Okay.
You already know,
Okay.
And then also it's just like it's just this, especially at the beginning, this perfect, like flawless child, and that will change, and so I guess I should wait till he's a teenager before I say parenthood's a bit easier than marriage. But so far,
we're just gonna look back at this.
It's pretty easy
and
fun.
You're gonna be like eating your own words.
Yeah, no kidding.
You're gonna eat a crow sandwich.
Yep. But so yeah, definitely it's pretty amazing thing to be in church community where you have those reference points, because so many people don't, right?
Sure.
Like there's so many people that have my situation or way worse, and there's no community that they belong to, that because it's not just like, oh, there's all these fathers around. It's like these guys are like cream of the crop.
I said I wasn't gonna do that, and then I did it right into the microphone. Yeah.
So you don't just have reference points, you have really quality reference points, and people that are there to help, right? There's people in our church that like they view that as part of their calling,
Sure.
To help and to be an example to those who haven't had them, and so it's just there's such a like blessing there that a lot of people don't get to partake in.
Yeah, I think too. It's like I know, like for me, like when you're growing up in the church, in a church, doesn't matter really, any church, you don't realize like the things like what you're talking about, right? Like where we have this network of not just your dad, but all of these men that are there and able to make an impact in the lives of other men, women, daughters, whatever,
Yeah.
kids, their kids, but then the other kids too, and like I grew up in church, but there was a period of time where like I walked away, and I just did my own thing. I was living my own life, and it's interesting to see how many people don't have that, and how we, and by we I mean like the people, like the kids within the church, cannot necessarily appreciate like that structure there, and that network and that framework that's been laid out. It's like I can think of conversations that I've had with people that have decided to do their own thing, and walk away from God, or and some of the complaints that I think of, like the most common complaints, it always ends up being about their parents. Like, oh, my parents did this, my mother did this, or my father did this, or this is this, and it's really weird. Like that's the common thread in all of them. In any of the people that I've talked to, it's like the thread is like they look at their parents like they look at God, and it's like they blame their parents for their upbringing. And dude, like, yeah, parents can be weird, man. Like we can all get raised in really weird ways, but guess what? Like everybody was raised weird. Like that's that's I
Yeah.
think sometimes it's like, oh, like I was raised really funky, and it's like, no, no one's normal. Like there's
Yeah.
no such thing as normal.
If you were raised by humans, you had weird parents.
Right. Like there's at least like you can count on two hands things that you did that another family didn't, or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Like it's just how it works. But what you did have was two parents that hopefully loved each other but stuck it out for you. Most of the people that I know, the ones that I'm talked to that are complaining, it's like your parents are still married. They're still together. They're still serving God. What are
Yeah.
you doing? Like that's a rarity in this day and age. And so for people to just like, I guess that's something that I think we can take for granted, especially when it comes to the impact of the fathers, because it's like, yeah, if it wasn't for those guys, like I wouldn't be here, right?
Yeah.
Like men who decided to be men and just fathers, and through their exampleship of fatherhood, my father was able to see, so that I at least had a fighting chance in this life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's always funny to me when I do hear people complaining about stuff like that, and because it ties right into that, like the idea of the fathers, and it's like, dude, yeah, maybe your father wasn't perfect, but tell you what, at least you had one.
Yeah.
Like, be grateful.
Yep.
Be grateful, Pablo.
Yeah, ingratitude is kind of a ugly, gross thing. And yeah, that mentality is hard for me to be real sympathetic towards, because like not, and I feel bad because I know people who've had way worse upbringings, so I don't want to like play the victim, but it's like I know what it's like to have a parent who is crazy, and that
Yeah.
created this terrible home environment. And and he was a pastor the whole time, so he's in this position of like power, and so much of the time it like couldn't get dealt with or fixed because of that. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
Like because he was the pastor, it was like there was no one really around
To go to.
check him. Yeah. And so I mean that's just sort of the nature of things. Not that he had he had his own pastor and, you know, people above him, leadership wise, that eventually did deal with him. And, you know, he lost his ministry when I was 21. But that was a much more drawn out process because these men aren't there, you know, seeing him all the time, right? So they're going off of, you know, third hand accounts and different things. And so it takes, you know, it takes a while for there to be a legitimate case where they can then come down and say, okay, like, you know, we've got to deal with this. But yeah, I don't know, when people complain about their parents, it's like, or blame them for, you know, why their life is the way it is, or why they've made bad decisions. It's like, I don't know, man. Like, if I made it made it out, I feel like anyone can. Because I'm not, that's the thing too, is I'm not like this super strong, forceful, you know, some personalities, man, it's just like nothing, right? You know, like you hear about these kids that come out of the projects and it's like, you know, it's like they had no advantages, every disadvantage you could think of, and they just
push through against all odds,
and, you know, made it to Stanford or whatever, you know, like that is not me. Like hard circumstances crush and defeat me, and so, I mean, I think the obvious point is that, right, like I gave my life to Jesus when I was 16, like right when things were pretty much the worst at home, and that was, you know, that made the difference. And so, obviously, just a miracle of God that I'm where I'm at now. And so, not trying to act like I guess that's the point, you know, is that so many of these people that have issues with their parents, it really comes down to an issue with God.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what they haven't reconciled that relationship. And so it's easy to point your finger at your parents when you're not right with God, you know. I think that's a lot of what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, it's it's interesting. I think about too, like as far as fathers go, like one of the things that I've just kind of went through my mind today is there's someone close to me that's not making the best calls right now, and I just think about their parents and just like the heartache that we as kids can put our parents through.
Yeah.
Like they've and I'm finally like I'm not married. I'm not yet. I'm not a father. But like I'm reaching an age where it's like I can see those things in the future, and I understand that that's going to one day play a role in my life, the role of a father at one point. and it's like just to like, so when I look at things that, you know, dads do or things like that, I look at it then from a different perspective than I did, you know, as a teenager or even as a kid, you know, and I just think about like what, like the pain that we put our parents through.
Yeah.
And yet, like, how do they not like curl into a ball and just like like go to like into like a depression sleep, a depression coma, you know what I mean? It's like some of those things, it's like, and dads especially, it's like they, you know, they've not only do they have the kids to take care of, but, you know, they have, you know, their wives, and they've got to keep the lights on, and they've got to, you know, make sure the rent's paid, and you got all of these stressors coming around, and then, you know, as kids just doing something stupid, and it's like what they go through, like what parents or like what fathers will go through. Like, I guess that's what I meant by my comment earlier, is it's like, that's like, I think fatherhood in some ways and parenthood in general, but fatherhood specifically. I guess since in the context of Father's Day, is like fathers will go through pain. Parents will go through pain for their kids, and it's like they do it because they love them, and we're not deserving of it in any way, shape, or form. I know I put my parents through hell, and they still took me back.
Yeah, because that's like what you're saying is like that they're making that like sacrifice, like immense sacrifice of their lives, like laying down their lives,
Sure.
so much of the time, or what they want for their life, or their needs or their desires, knowing full well that you're not going to appreciate it like you should, at best.
At best.
At worst, you're going to totally give your parents the finger and treat them terribly and have no appreciation. And yeah, I mean, like you're saying, that's right, Jesus. It's like God gave us the best, right, is the best thing he had, knowing full well that we were gonna like,
Yeah.
Thanks, that's cool.
That's cool, man.
That most of humanity was going to reject it, the gift of Jesus and the cross still, yeah, it's just interesting how that plays out. Like, yeah, that our our parents are an expression of God in nature,
Yeah.
in the material, or I guess the physical world.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, and just that there's, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It's like there's God's nature is in parents.
Yeah.
Like not perfectly formed like it is in God, but that our parents are doing their best to live out that expression of God in the world. And just that, like, that's what the family represents,
Yeah.
And I think our, like, people that are like the nuclear family thing, right? The father and the mother in the home. It's sort of been diminished or undervalued in our society recently, but I think people are making a huge mistake, when they diminish that, the role of a two-parent home. It's like the thing that keeps the world moving,
Yeah.
like that keeps the world functioning. And it's this representation of God, these little, pockets of God all over the world.
Here's something I've been thinking about too. It's related, loosely, but like this idea of like the next generation. I don't know why, but this thought has been fascinating me recently, and I guess it does relate. It relates. It relates because of dads, but like I had listened to a podcast with Kevin Hart in it, and he had brought it up, and I think this is probably what kind of planted like the seed most recently. I mean, I've thought about this before, but this is just kind of what planted the seed in my mind as of late. It was just, he's talking about being at a point in his life where like he's no longer like setting things up for himself. He's trying to set things up for like the next generation. And like it seems in some ways fathers and men, anybody, but like the adults, I think fathers and men in particular, like setting up, there's something about like a portion of your life being spent preparing the next generation so that there is something to go on. And like that's something like within us innate, that it's like like I don't know, like I think about the things that it's like whenever I do have a kid, like I think about the things that I want to teach them, right?
Yeah.
Like what is that? What is that? Like where does that come from? Like
It's our evolutionary instincts
like trying
to perpetuate our genes.
it's something, man. It's some just, but also too something about like leaving a legacy. I think in some ways too, right? Like about like passing on this info into the next, and just how crucial that is. Yeah, I don't know. It's something I've just kind of been throwing around in my mind for a little bit. I'm not totally sure what to think of it yet.
Yeah, I like this idea that you want the next generation to like stand on your shoulders, you know.
Yeah.
To not that you're building something that. It is interesting because, like, it's not something that we're gonna see. You know, we'll see, you know, our kids, grandkids.
We see a piece of it.
Maybe great grandchildren, but it's in us to like, yeah, to create a better world or to give our offspring a chance to be better. And it's not necessarily something that we're gonna any sort of reward. There's not necessarily a reward in this life for
Correct. That. Exactly.
But it's an instinctual thing to do to elevate the next generation, so then they can, you know,
right.
So then you're this.
Well, like I think about like my pops, right? He grew up in the ghetto. Like he grew up just running the streets. I didn't. I grew up in a house. I've always had a roof over my head. I've always had two parents who loved me. Like I've always, right? And so he's built this life and allowed me to live a life that he never could, right? Like he's moved the game piece, you know, that much farther, right? And it's like, so in some ways, like I'm like the first generation. I'm like a cultural immigrant in a sense from like my dad should have been a statistic, right? Like, so I'm the first generation of his bloodline that hasn't grown up in the ghetto, like that hasn't grown up in this like crazy lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so it's like, okay, so then it's like, then there's that like responsibility to take like what's been given to you and to move it farther, at the very least, however much farther it might be for the next generation, you know?
Yeah.
You know, from poor to middle class to rich, whatever. Like,
yeah.
It's just fascinating to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because you see it, I mean, like you were saying, in our own lives. Like I'm already better off than my parents ever were growing up.
Sure.
I mean, and there's other, you know, there's a lot of factors to that, but yeah, like I live in a nicer house than I grew up in.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Like that's interesting to me. You know, it's like almost bizarre to think about that I, you know, and part of that, you know, was decisions my parents made. Like my dad probably could have been plenty successful in a career if he wanted to, but he decided to be a pastor in Springfield, Oregon, which was like not
middle of nowhere,
bustling metropolis. And then he went very early on. He went full time, so he wasn't working a job. So our whole livelihood was the church.
That's crazy.
Dependent on the church.
Yeah.
And so in our church was not a lot of high flyers, you know, like, yeah, lots of people on welfare, you know, so they're not even able to give very much, if at all.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And so then we're dependent on this small little church, and so there would be months where my parents wouldn't take a salary because there was no salary to take.
Right.
Like all the time, not
Yeah.
all the time, but often. And so like my whole life, I don't remember a time where my dad was going to a job.
Sure.
Because he was he went, became full time that early on in the church. And so part of that, is because of that, that there was definitely some really lean times growing up. But it is interesting. It's like just that thing of like, if your parents raise you right, they may not have the greatest opportunities or advantages, but they're giving you a chance that you can take advantage of whatever opportunities, like you're saying. It's like your dad came from running around in the streets. Obviously very little stability and all of these things that help you.
Yeah, exactly.
But he gave you that. And so now you're already 10 steps
ahead of wherever he was. Yeah.
Where he was. And so how much better of a whatever life are you going to be able to provide for your children? And I don't think that is I don't know the correct term, but I think at some point that probably levels off,
Sure.
Where you're not, it's not like each generation you're just
right. You're gonna plateau at some point.
Yeah, there you go, plateau. But yeah, and then just not just in terms of like finances or whatever, but also spiritually,
Sure.
to raise your kids in a home where they're not, like, I don't know your dad's whole story, but I know some of it, and just being in the environment that he was around, it's like for him to be able to raise you guys and spare you, all of that. It's like just, it's like immeasurably beneficial in comparison.
No, I agree 100%. Yeah, it's something that it's crazy to think about sometimes, and
because that stuff's real. I guess that's the thing. Like in terms of fathers, it's like the stuff that I went through growing up, like, set me back. It took me a long time to find figure out how to function in life.
yeah.
So like those factors are absolutely real. It's not that you can't figure it out or climb out of whatever circumstances you were raised in, but it makes it a lot harder. And so it's like, for me, man, my hope is to, I don't know. I'm worried I'm gonna like go to the other extreme and like never ever discipline my kid. It's like,
You better, dude.
I want to give him only 100% love and support.
I'll whoop him when you're not looking.
Yeah.
When you and Grace aren't looking, I'll spank him for you.
And so, but it's like, so that is one of the things that I think about a lot, and I'm very conscious of not doing that to my son, to not destroy his confidence when he's a little kid, so that it takes him till he's 25 till he has any sort of traction in life.
It's oddly specific, Aaron.
Yeah.
No, I get it. I know what you mean.
I mean, it took me years to just have the confidence to navigate the world and to like step out into life. Just grew up so intimidated by the world, and just having like zero confidence in myself.
That's the craziest thing, dude. Like we all have those demons that we fight that come from stuff like that, right? Because our parents obviously aren't perfect. I don't care who you are. You're gonna find a flaw with them, but or
if one of your parents is perfect, and the other one was,
Right,
like
exactly.
my mom was perfect. You know?
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. But my dad wasn't. Like she had to be, you know. But
Yeah.
just regardless, is like two perfect parents. Highly improbable.
Yeah. Yeah, and just oh nuts, I forgot it what I was going to say. But just that it's like, look, like at some point you realize that like where we're at is a choice also. Like you can choose to take the hand that you've been dealt and just say, well, I fold. You know, like,
Yeah.
all right, these cards suck. I'm done. And you can just cash it in and do nothing with it. Or you can take that and say, you know what? Yeah, this sucks, but I'm going to trade this one in. I'm going to trade this one in. And before you know it, you're working with something a lot better.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think like that, like it's a miracle in general that we even like as a society and as a culture that we like even held together at all, because it's like if it wasn't for at least a good portion of us saying like, yeah, all right, I was screwed up, I grew up screwed up, whatever, like I'm not going to let that define me, then like we wouldn't have a society. You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah.
like that, it's just part of human nature.
Yeah. Did you like? For me, it took a while to realize that I could trade my cards in. Was that like, because I have like not a specific moment, but I have this time of my life, a period of my life where it started to click. Like, oh, like I can improve
Who
I
you
am.
are.
Did
Yeah.
Did you have a moment or a time like that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it'd have to be. I think so much of like I'll bring it up again and again, but I think like I say it just because it was like such a pivotal point for me. But like I think it was like when I like went through my first like my only divorce when I got divorced from my first wife. It was like it was I just remember like at the time one of my good friends, like my good childhood friends, I'm still friends with him to this day. Like we're best friends, and I would hang out with him, and I'd go to his house, and we just play video games. And he had an older brother that lived with him, so I was like what 20, I was 20 at the time, and then his brother was like probably like 28. He's a few years older, but he worked at Walmart, and everything that came out of his mouth was just how horrible life was and how horrible his ex was and how just life just sucked since he I'm sorry, let me back up. He had gone through a divorce, and it had been 2-3 years or whatever, and it just everything was just, my life is horrible, my life is this, and everything is bad, and I just remember seeing that and looking at him and just seeing how bitter and hurt he was, and then just thinking about like me and where I was. It's like, okay, look, I'm in a really bad situation here. Like everything that I thought was reality no longer exists.
So
And
had you been divorced? You were already divorced then, or you were still married?
good question. I was probably going through the process of it.
Okay.
Like I was probably in the process of everything going down. But I remember seeing him, and I just remember I I was a wreck for a little bit there. But I remember like going to the church and praying, and like there was a moment that I had like where I was like, okay, I'm at a crossroads here. Like I can either take this situation that's been given to me, and I can like dwell in it, and I can turn out like this guy over here that I see. That's where that road leads to. I can see that. Or I can figure out where I went wrong and make sure that this never, ever, ever happens again. And like, that was the moment I was like, I remember there. I remember very vividly just like being like, what are you gonna do? What's the choice you're gonna make? And it was like, well, I see where that one goes. Like, cause I was feeling sorry for myself. I was like, oh, how could this happen to me? Yada yada yada. Like, just so in my own head and in the situation. And like, of course, everybody's, oh, it's okay, you know, and they're giving you support. Which, guys, I was the problem. Just saying. I mean, look, she played a role in it, but I was the problem. Let's be real here. That's another discussion for another time. But just the idea of, like, I just decided, you know what? I'm not going to let this define. That's what it was. I said, I'm not going to let this define who I am. I'm not going to let this be the point where I stop. And it was after that I began to just, I went on this, like, truth-seeking, whatever you want to call it, like, journey, expedition.
Rule number 8.
Number 8. And I was just like, I picked everything apart, ran through it all a million times in my head. Like, okay, what? This led to this, which led to that, which led to this, which led to that. And it's like, oh, okay, so I screwed up here, here, and here. And it's like, well, if I don't do this and I don't do this, then I can make sure that that never happens again. You know? And it was, you know, I definitely didn't get it all right. And I mean, I'm still working it out. But I'm in a way better position than I ever was before. But it was like, it was at that point, I think, when I was like 19 or 20, probably 20. When I was like, oh, you know what? Like, I don't have to always be this person. Like, I don't have to be this whatever I was. Like, I can change this. And I did. Like, you know, and it wasn't all me. Like, it was, you know, God played a huge role in it. That wouldn't be who I am if it wasn't for him. But there was definitely a point where it was like I had to make that choice. Like, I remember it was a conscious decision at that moment. And then after that, it became subconscious. And, you know, it just kind of worked itself out. But it was like, there was a crossroads where it was like, what are you going to do? And that's what it was for me. What about for you?
Well, first I want to say that's such a great story. Like, that you have had this, like, this person to show you, like, what you're, you know, this, like, almost this premonition.
Yeah, it was
like, this could be the future you. Like, you could be at Walmart.
Yeah, pushing carts.
Wallowing in
Self-pity.
And like digging yourself a pit and crawling into it, in a pit that you may never get out of, you know?
Right.
That's intense, man. Because it's like everything, man, it comes back to rule number 8.
Yeah.
Telling the truth. Because that's the thing, is like where he was at, that's so convenient, man, and it's so easy.
Well, here's the
Right?
thing, though,
Like,
is he'd been there for years. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what I saw. Like, that, it wasn't just that he just happened to be in that spot. It's like, this was like 2, 3, 4 years down the road at this point. And I'm like, you know, this is new, fresh for me. It's like, I don't want to be there when I'm 24 or 25 or whatever age it is. It's like, whoa, you know? And yeah, it's like Christmas Carol, you know?
So ghost of Christmas future, man.
Yeah.
Came to haunt you.
Yeah.
That's so funny. I was literally just about waiting for you to get done so I could say the ghost of Christmas future.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's hardcore. But, man, thank goodness.
Right.
Because, yeah, and it's just such a simple thing. It's like, it's just a little choice. it's like, where are you going to go with your mind? Like, what's the narrative you're going to tell yourself, you know? And it's like, that crossroad, it's like, okay, I can tell the truth, or I can run with this thing that makes me feel good and okay, but is like destruction, you know? And that's the thing that Jordan Peterson talks about, that thing of, like, if you aren't willing to tell the truth, you're bringing about hell on earth.
Right.
And so that guy was like brought about, like, you know, I don't know where he's at now, but it's like,
it was his own personal
like,
hell.
yeah, that's what I mean. It's like he brought about hell on earth, man, for himself, you know.
Yeah, he was miserable, man. He was the most miserable person I'd known up to that point. He's doing better now, but it just, like, at the time, it was like, ugh. That's not what I want, brother.
Yeah. For me, I don't know. I don't remember a specific moment. I think it was just one of those things where, like, just a few, you know, enough inputs, things I listened to, read, this, you know, all of a sudden it was like, started to crystallize of like, oh, like, there's a different way to go about this. And just so strange, because it was like now it's like, well, of course, but it was like I hadn't like come to the realization that there was like something I could do.
Right.
You know, like, there was like almost this thing of just like, I just kept waiting for things to fall into place, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm doing these things, I'm doing, you know, what I know to do, but it's like, man, you know, it's like I'm still just, in so many ways, you know, my life was progressing, but in so many ways it was like I was still just stuck as a person. And man, dude, thank God for podcasts, dude, because that, like, and that's where it really like clicked, is like, there's a guy, I can't remember his name right now, but he does the Art of Manliness podcast.
Brett.
Brett.
It starts with an M, I want to say, but I don't remember.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
So, and he would have, you know, like, they weren't like these profound, but he would have, it's like an hour, maybe, if that, interview with someone who typically had just written a book, you know, like some sort of self-help.
I listened to a few of them, yeah.
And man, he pumps them out too, like, all the time. And then he had, like, you know, just different things, like stuff on YouTube, like how to work out, you know, just like, it's just such a neat thing that he had come up with, right? Like, just this whole brand, I guess, of like, just to help people, you know, men figure out how to be men. You know? And for me, there, you know, just so many different little things. He has like how to tie a tie, like, you know, just these basic things that you take for granted. And so I, you know, started listening to his podcast, and so just all of a sudden exposed to all of these different people that are successful and driven, and their focus is like on self-improvement, you know.
Sure.
And so it just like got my mind in that space, and then from there, like, the ultimate human optimization guy is Joe Rogan. And so, you know, and that's,
you drank the Kool-Aid.
Oh yeah, hardcore.
We all did.
Yep. And so then I, you know, was listening to Joe Rogan, Art of Manliness all the time, and yeah, man, and just got me fired up to change, you know. And I remember just having this thing, and it was too, that it wasn't just the podcast. There was like this thing that like had been sort of germinating in me of just like, where I wasn't satisfied, you know. It's like, man, this, like, there has to be more, you know, like, there's got to be more I can do to be better. And so those kind of all came together. And so, and now, man, I nailed it, dude. I got it all figured out, man.
Oh, that's good.
Fixed all my problems, dude.
Well, I'm glad one of us did.
The perfect specimen.
Oh, jeez.
No, but I mean, that is the great thing. It's like it never ends, you know. And I go through lulls, you know. I hit like, where I'm like, dude, I'm taking on all of these new habits, and then you kind of like, oh man, dude, I did too much. And so then I'll have a few months where I'm just like back to just like, man, get through the day.
Right.
But recover, come back strong. I will say it's funny when during that first period where I was like really, I mean, I would try and like change everything overnight, like all at once, you know. That's like such a rookie move, man.
Rookie move.
And so that took me a while to figure out, and I think that's partly where I'm at, kind of why I'm at where I'm at now. It's like, just like, okay, like this is a marathon, not a sprint.
Right.
You know,
yeah.
and just take things day by day, and another Jordan Peterson maxim: compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today.
Right.
And that's another one of those like truths that to live by, because that, you know, that puts it in perspective. It's like, okay, just be better than you were yesterday. And man, time flies, and next thing you know, 5 years have gone by, and either you're right where you were 5 years ago,
Right.
or you're on a whole nother planet, you know.
Well, like, I think one of the things that you said a little bit earlier really rings true is what you choose to focus on. Like, if you only see why it can't work or why it won't work, that is all you will see.
Yeah.
Like, if you see what's wrong with something or why something isn't happening, that's all you will see. It's like you have to choose to like override that in your brain sometimes at some point, you know, to get ahead. Because it's like sometimes there's no way of knowing otherwise.
Yeah, and you got to be realistic. Like, that was, again, like, there's a balancing act.
Sure.
You know? Because if you're not realistic, reality will remind you.
Right.
And that was like what I ran into at first, of like, all right, no excuses. But then it's like, well, like, I'm still me.
Right.
You know?
Yep.
And then when I failed at all the new habits I tried to take on. Well,
guess I'm a loser.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, you have to be real about who you are, where you're at in life, and you know, choose your course accordingly. Not everyone's David Goggins. So
even David Goggins started out with a quarter mile. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, he had to work up to where he was at. You know?
Sort of. Well, I mean, he ran that 24-hour. He ran the 100 miles.
Yeah, but before, when he lost all the weight, like,
oh, for sure.
When he first started losing the weight,
yeah,
he
that's
had
true.
to. He couldn't run, man.
Yeah. Yeah, he had to swim and bike.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know, dude. It's crazy. It's crazy, this world that we live in. It's crazy that it goes around.
Yeah.
Despite us.
Yep.
But.
Yep.
Well, we're at an hour. I think it's time to call it.
I think so. I
think we accomplished what we set out to do.
I think so.
I sure hope so, man.
Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully you're still watching.
Hopefully you guys like this. Because even if you don't, we enjoy it. So, well, that's all that we have for you tonight. Thank you for joining us in the Prose Before Bros. We decided on that before the first one, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So, Prose Before Bros. thank you guys for checking us out. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you're listening, this episode is not brought to you by anything. This episode is brought to you by Aaron's house because Aaron is letting us host it. And thank you. So other than that, have a good night.
Peace.
Peace.
Tell the truth.
Or at least don't lie.